Happy Feast Day.
Oh, thank you.
All right, technically, it's not Good Shepherd's Feast Day, all right? But anytime we read the gospel about the lost sheep, we think of the Good Shepherd. All right, so today we think of our Good Shepherd and our parish family. All right, now you know that I have two nuggets, right? You decide whether the nugget is gold or cold. Chicken nuggets is not an option. Now, I'm going to ask your indulgence because my first nugget, I want to go last. Right, can you get that? And the second nugget will be the first. Okay, so the second nugget is always about the gospel. Okay, in today's gospel reading, all right, we have the parable of the lost sheep. And we take the 99 out of the mixture. There are two characters in this parable, okay? One is the Good Shepherd, and the other one is the lost sheep. Now, in this parable, I'm going to play both roles. Now, I'm going to ask you, who amongst you has been a shepherd? You mean I'm the only one? And you're saying to yourself, how could a kid from Brooklyn ever be a shepherd? All right? But I was. From my sophomore year in high school to my sophomore year in college, I spent every summer in a seminarian's camp up in Stowe, Vermont. And one year, the three of us who were, like, sort of like the senior counselors, it was run by a saintly Monsignor, all right, and he gave all of his life savings to this camp so that seminaries would have a place to go in the summer. So the three of us, one was from Parkchester, one was from the Bronx, and I was from Brooklyn. 3 city kids. And one summer we decided that we were going to make some money. So we decided that we were going to pool $45 and buy 3 lambs and fatten them up, and 2 months later we were going to sell them for a profit. All right, so we bought the 3 lambs, right, for, in those days, $45 was a fortune. All right, so we bought the 3 lambs, and of course, being city kids, we didn't know how to build a sheep pen. And during the course of the 2 months of the summer, the sheep got out quite a bit. All right, and we were in the midst of dairy country up in Stowe, Vermont. And a couple of times during the summer, we'd get a phone call, and the phone call would be from a neighboring farmer saying, "Hey, listen, guys, come down and get your sheep because they're spooking our cows." All right, now when you spook a cow doesn't give milk for a day or 2. All right, so we're taking money out of these farms. They weren't too happy with us. All right, so in the beginning we thought we could outrun the sheep. You can't outrun a sheep, right? So it took us quite a bit, to get these sheep back in their pen, right? So I have a great appreciation for the Good Shepherd when he went out looking for that lost sheep. Okay, now the second part, I'm going to play the lost sheep, okay? Because I was lost, and most of you know that story, but I'm going to just try to boil it down very smallly and concretely if I can. All right, you know that I grew up in a CIA family, all right? Catholic, Irish, and alcoholic, all right? Both my parents were alcoholic. My father was a daily drinker. My mother was a periodic drinker. She could go weeks, even months without a drink, but when she had that first drink, she was laid down drunk. All right, now, statistics say that, if you have both parents alcoholic, you have a 3 out of 4 chance of being an alcoholic yourself, all right? So if you're a baseball player, if every time you got out 4 times and you hit 3 balls, you were hitting 750, you would be a superhero, right? But for somebody who is battling a disease, it's not great odds. So I was, and I did become an alcoholic. All right, and in my alcoholism, all right, it started out, my day-to-day drinking started out in my last parish, where the pastor decided that it would be a great thing, all right, if we all had a happy hour at night. Okay, and that started my day-to-day drinking. Now, after a year, I left to get married, right? And I met my wife and we got married. And for the next 10 years, I had alcohol in my system every single day. All right, and she got pretty fed up with it, you know, and she'd confront me every once in a while. And, you know, my retort was always, yeah, Vern, but I'm an alcoholic, all right, and I'm not hurting anyone. All right, now, towards the end of that 10 years, all right, two things happened, all right, and they were miraculous things. All right, now, when you're an alcoholic, you do not have a religion, all right, you run from God. And little did I know that, you know, my God was really the hound of heaven, all right, and as I was running from him, he was running after me, nipping at my heels, all right. He was throwing up signposts all along the way, you know, saying, stop and just listen, I want to help you, all right? So the two things that happened was that there was one Saturday, all right, I had just finished mowing the lawn, and it was Miller time, all right? So I went into the couch and I, you know, poured myself a stiff one, and I was watching a game on TV, and my son comes in, he was 7 years old, and he comes in and he says, hey, Dad, do you want to have a catch? And I said, yeah, Joey. And before I could get the next part of the sentence out of my mouth, he said, yeah, but later, right, Dad? And he turned around and walked out the door. And at that moment, I realized that my drinking was hurting that kid, because that kid knew that any time he asked me to do him a favor, to do something for him, all right, I would say yes, but I would never do it, all right? I never realized that before, that I was hurting this kid. But that wasn't enough to make me stop drinking, all right? The second thing that happened was I worked in an office of 50 probation officers, and during that time there was a probation officer that I really wasn't friendly with, but I loved the way he did the job. I loved him as a person, you know, he was just a great person. We were never friendly. One day I was passing his office and he said, Vin, you got a minute? I said, yeah, sure, Mike, what's up? He said, why don't you come in? So I came in. Now we'd go into each other's offices, you know, like, and talk. And so he said, you know, close the door. Now that was, you know, like uncommon. So I closed the door, and for the next hour and a half, he told me his story. He told me how he was an alcoholic and that how he was in AA for the last year and a half. So I told him quite bluntly, I said, Mike, I'm an alcoholic too, but I don't want to stop drinking. He said, that's okay, man, don't worry about it. So on October 21st, 1983, it was a Friday night, you can Google it. Now I was, you know, like either sleeping or passed out, and so my wife came in and she said, Ben, we're going to have to talk. You know how husband hates to hear those words. All right, so I said, okay, Bern, what's the matter? She said, Vinny, you're going to have to stop drinking. And I said, you know, Bern, I'm not an alcoholic. And before I could get the rest out, that I wasn't hurting anyone, she said, yeah, Vinny, you are an alcoholic. And she said, unless you stop drinking, all right, the kids and I are leaving. And at that moment, all right, I had a moment of clarity. And once again, this is the hound of heaven, putting up another signpost. Clarity was that I left the priesthood to get married. I wanted a wife and a family. I had those, but I was going to lose that also. All right, I was going to have nothing. All right, so I promised her with tears in my eyes, saying, you know, like, I'm going to stop drinking, Bern. I didn't know how I was going to do that, because in all my drinking, all right, I never, not even, you know, like a lot of my drinking buddies would give up alcohol for Lent. I couldn't even do that, all right? So somehow I white-knuckled it, all right, through that night, and as would be, you know, bad luck. The next day, she was having a nun friends over, and they don't know how to make drinks. So I was elected to be the bartender. So I was making all these drinks and not being able to drink myself. So that Monday I went in and I said to Mike, listen, Mike, I said, I got to stop drinking, all right, but I don't want to go to AA. And he said, don't worry about it, Vin. Now, Mike was in my office every hour on the hour, all right, and he took me out to lunch practically every day, and all he did was talk the program, all right. So I made it through that week, and then on that weekend, the second weekend, I decided I wasn't going to make it. I just wasn't going to make it. So the second Monday I went in and I said to Mike, I said, listen, I said, take me to a meeting, because I got to get into AA. I'm not going to make it on my own. He said, usually, Vin, I take it to my home group. You know, every alcoholic who's in AA has a home group, a group that they don't miss that meeting for anything. So he said, but tonight, you know, he says, I'm giving a commitment. I'm talking at another group. He said, the group is at Jamaica Hospital. Why don't you meet me at Jamaica Hospital? So I did. And before we went into the meeting, he said, Vinny, at an AA meeting, they go around the room and they introduce themselves. You know, like, for instance, I'm Mike and I'm an alcoholic. He said, when they get to you, all you have to do is say, I'm Vinny, I'm here to listen. So they were going around the room, all right, and they were all identifying themselves, and I was about halfway through, and 3 or 4 people before me, you know, like, identifying themselves, and all of a sudden, I got this warm feeling, all right, in my chest. All right, and I didn't hear any words, but the feeling was, Vinny, this is where I want you to be. All right, and when it came to my turn, I said, hi, I'm Vinny, I'm an alcoholic, and this is my first meeting. All right, and after that meeting now, you know Jamaica is an all-black area. Mike and I were the only white guys in the room. All right, the other AAs at the end of the meeting came, hugged me, and told me to keep coming back, okay? Now that's the story of how I got into AA. All right, now I've been in AA since that, thank God, because I haven't had a drink since then. All right, now, why do I tell you this story? All right, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think that God loves me any more than he loves you? No, he doesn't, right? All right, so what I'm trying to say to you is that God is always nipping at your heels. God is the hound of heaven. He's always throwing up signposts. He's always trying to say, listen, no matter what, I got your back, all right? I'll always be with you, and I'll always lead you on the straight and narrow if you just look for the signpost, all right? Now, the second nugget. The first one was all about loss. We had the loss sheet, all right? I want to talk to you about a different loss. Now, most of us as adults, we know that in life we are going to lose people. We know that we're going to lose our parents. We know, as couples are sitting here today, because Bernie and I have talked about this quite a bit, one of us is going to survive the other. So this is the loss. This is the loss that we're talking about. The loss of a loved one, the loss of your spouse, and God forbid, but it happens, the loss of a child, the loss of a grandchild. So what we are going to offer in the beginning of October is a bereavement. All right, so anybody who has suffered one of those losses, why don't you come to the bereavement? Now I go to AA, all right, because I need AA. I need the fellowship of AA to get me through. And those of you who have suffered that loss, I'm just offering that, come and let us help you. They say it's saying that if you're having trouble and if you talk to somebody else about your trouble, you half your trouble. So there's great help in any self-help group. So if you're suffering a loss, please come and join our bereavement group. Namaste.